In today's Locked On Pelicans, the Pels and Jose Alvarado agree on an extension, and I'll tell you why it hints at what his role will be this season. Plus, it's media day, and I have what you want to know, plus some trade rumors. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Monday, and it is media day. I will be there at the Smoothie King Center asking all the questions you want. Got a couple of interviews lined up. You'll see them here on the show on YouTube as well. So this is a great week to subscribe to Locked On Pelicans wherever you get your podcast and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason. And become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we'll get into Media Day next, but the big news from the Pelicans over the weekend coming from Shams Charania of The Athletic, maybe elsewhere, who knows, was Jose Alvarado signing an extension with the New Orleans Pelicans. He's under contract this year, so it's a 2-year extension beyond this year for $9 million total. So essentially $4.5 million each season. The second year is a player option. So Jose has the option after next season, not this season, next season, to opt out and become a free agent. Honestly, my first reaction to this was just like, good for Jose. Go and get your money. This is someone who's not made a ton of money by NBA standards, but is a very impactful player to the New Orleans Pelicans. And the everydayers, the people who've listened to Locked On Pelicans Monday through Friday here, know I am not going to do one thing this year, and that is doubt Jose Alvarado. I did that actually a bunch last season, and he's proven me wrong every step of the way. And I love Jose here. We got the game-worn jersey behind me. But there seem to be some limitations. Those limitations show up in the playoffs. More on that in a minute, because that's a problem you don't need to worry about right now. But I think this is an excellent value contract for New Orleans. You could argue that this contract and Herb Jones's contract are maybe two of the best in the NBA right now. Jose is going to make $2 million this season, $4.5 million next year. He's made about $5 million so far in his career. So this is essentially more than, when you count in the $2 million this year, more than double that. So we're thrilled for Jose. We want players to get paid. We want them to be happy, succeed. And if he's cool with this deal, we're all happy here. And I think he's very excited for this. This is a wonderful story with Jose Alvarado. When you just kind of look at storylines, especially, I'm going to sound like David Griffin, on the human level here with everything. This is fantastic. This is a guy that was a 4-year starter, was undrafted, went on a 2-way deal, earned a spot in the rotation for the New Orleans Pelicans, got a regular NBA contract, and now gets an extension, paid him close to $10 million. This is awesome. This is also a big, good, like, green flag, we can use that word here, for the Pelicans in terms of player development. They knew this was someone that they should sign. They signed him, and look at how they developed him and brought him along. Now, a lot of that is on Jose and his just incredible work ethic that he has with this team. Like, this dude is a culture setter within that locker room. Look at how all the players absolutely love him. Brandon Ingram there with him a couple of years ago when he won MVP of the Rising Stars game, and Ingram was so freaking excited for him, front row watching that happen. He's a fan favorite as well. For people who just want to be fans of the team, you don't want to get into all the nitty gritty stuff, just keeping a dude on the team that you really like, that is easy to root for, is a fantastic thing. But it speaks to, some of the job that the Pelicans have done in terms of scouting. Finding those diamonds in the rough that you shine up and turn into something even better. And that's an important thing, particularly for a team in a small market. Look at some of these guys that have gotten paid from the Pelicans. Kenrich Williams is one. partially the previous regime. But since David Griffin has taken over, you have Jose Alvarado. You have Najee Marshall. You're seeing Trey Murphy, who was the 17th pick in the draft, is going to get a bag here. Herb Jones, second round pick, getting paid too and becoming one of the better defenders at the NBA level here. This is a wonderful thing. If you're looking for a competitive advantage, this is never going to be a free agent destination. But can you become a team that those like choice undrafted guys want to sign with? A team that guys who are going to be on a two-way want to sign with and play for? Can you get the cream of the crop with those type of players? And New Orleans has shown they will bring you in, they will develop you, and they will get you paid in a way that you might not get anywhere else. That is a way to bring in some better talent to this roster. This Jose Alvarado story, just him getting paid, is a fantastic thing all around for everybody here. And I also think this shows what his role is going to be with this team this coming year. You have to wonder if DeJounte Murray is starting and CJ McCollum is coming off the bench. Maybe CJ is kind of your backup point guard. They've tried him with lead guard over the past couple of years, but we've seen that that's not the best version of CJ McCollum. He's better off ball, particularly with the three-point shooting that he brings to the team that he did last year, where he was awesome with it, one of the best in the league. Is Jose Alvarado going to be the backup point guard? When we talked about him last week, the week before, when I was like, I'm never going to doubt him this season, we looked at kind of his impact on the team, the on-off numbers, that when you look at the lineups with him in there, the team just won their minutes when Jose Alvarado was out there on the court in a pretty impressive fashion. He is arguably one of the most impactful players on the team, but not just for the stats. The steals are good. The defense that he gives you in the full court and things like that is absolutely fantastic. But it's also, as we said earlier, just the culture setter, the hustle guy, the energy guy that you just can't ignore that causes everyone else on this team to raise their games. He was the most impactful player in terms of on-off for the team last season, more so than Trey Murphy. And after we talked about Trey Murphy earlier in the last week, you understand his impact to this team. But Jose is there, and I think you're going to see him be one of the first guys off the bench for this team, a guy that has that impact that's going to be the backup point guard, and that allows CJ McCollum to work off ball and be the best version of himself too. If Jose wasn't going to be in line for a significant role, would the team have given him this deal? And I'm not sure that the answer is yes. Every dollar kind of matters right now, but this is a fantastic contract for the New Orleans Pelicans. A fantastic contract, and I'm very thrilled that they got this deal done. More on Trey Murphy's extension here in a minute, but Jose Alvarado being just a phenomenal player. The lineup that he was in the most, Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, Larry Nance Jr. was a plus 30 essentially in 160 possessions. They were a plus 19.9 with him on the court last season in terms of net rating. That is a fantastic number. Give Jose all the love. Glad to see that he's going to be in here long term. I would support giving him like a lifetime deal personally. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So next segment here on Locked On Pelicans, we're going to switch gears to Media Day. I have kind of like one or two big questions we want of all of the big name people, from David Griffin, Willie Green, Zion Williamson, Ingram, CJ, Murray, all of those guys. We're going to give you kind of the one question we want to know the answer to all that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. NFL fans, NBA fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. They have live in-game betting. Feeling good or bad about the Saints' chances in the second half, you can get in on the live line. If you feel good about the Pelicans on opening night, it's -6.5 over the Chicago Bulls. That number is only going to grow. Might be best to jump on that one now. And when you place your first $5 bet, you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. When you place, again, your first $5 bet, it's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's over at FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well here. And become an everydayer, that means you listen Monday through Friday. And look, if you're a new listener, I appreciate you being here. We're going to dive into everything. Particularly this week is a really good week to listen to Monday through Friday, because we're going to have all the quotes from Media Day. We're going to have the breakdowns. We're going to get into training camp. We're going to try and schedule a guest here as well, or two for the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll have some interviews from Media Day as well on the channel. So make sure you're following along Locked On Pelicans, especially this week. Now for your second listen today. Locked On NBA, no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's switch gears to Media Day. By the time you're listening to this, it might already be underway, starting early in the morning because the Pelicans are getting on a plane, heading to, I think it was Nashville, for training camp, where they're going to be kind of sequestered away as there are facility upgrades going on. So when they come back, brand new, shiny facility, ready to take on the season. So what do we expect? What do we expect from Media Day? What do we want to hear about on Media Day? And truthfully, you're not going to get like hard answers to some of the questions that you want. Those aren't necessarily even, appropriate questions to ask when it comes to this. And Media Day is for a lot of platitudes that make good sound bites. They show a cohesiveness, even if that's not always true. And I'm not saying it's spin or PR, but if we go in and are like, what are you going to do about the center position? The answer to that is going to be, we like the centers that we have. We like Daniel Tice. We like Carlo Makovich. We drafted Yves Missi because we're really high on him. They're not going to be like, yeah, we know we have one of the weakest center rotations, if not the weakest in the league, and we're going to maybe trade some of these guys away to try and upgrade that, which means it's not worth asking that question when you kind of know what some of these answers are going to be. When we ask about Brandon Ingram, they're going to say we want him to be here. He wants to be here. We'll try and find a solution, but everyone's focused on winning the season. It's going to be things like that. But there are some questions that I think we can get some answers to. So kind of let's run through, from what we want to hear from some of these guys. Let's start with David Griffin. And I think what we want to hear is, how do you evaluate this team as the season goes on? And how did you evaluate it last year to kind of arrive where you are? What is the front office looking at? And what are the expectations for this team? Expectations are a very subjective thing, I think. We can put them on there, but is that what the team is looking to do? What are the expectations for this team this year? What is considered a good season, a bad season? I think those are some of the questions that I have. How do you evaluate the season as it goes on? 10 games in, how do you evaluate what to do next to try and improve the team and where you are in terms of the Western Conference, which is going to be really tough. For Willie Green, I think it's, what does this team look like on the court? What is going to be the identity of this franchise? Defensively, we know what they do. Offensively, we have kind of an idea of what they want to do. But what are they going to play small a bunch? Does he want to go with a more traditional lineup, including a starting center that's Daniel Tice or Karlo Makovich? Two guys that, if you're curious about the center rotation for the Pelicans, I've talked at length about in the past week. So go and give those shows a listen. When it comes to this roster, are you going to play fast? Is it going to be slower, small ball, regular, more conventional lineup? Is it launching threes? Is it putting shooters around Zion Williamson? How do you make these tough decisions on who to play, who starts, who comes off the bench? What are the roles that you envision for certain players? What is James Borrego's role within building this offense too? Those are the type of questions that I do think we can get answers to. And we're going to have to wait to hear from Willie Green later on Monday. For Zion Williamson, what I want to hear about from him is more about the offseason. It seems like some things have clicked. Some things have kind of been put in place for him that haven't always been there, and that he seems to have acknowledged that he's made mistakes in the past, that he's trying to kind of atone for those. Straight vengeance is what he's out for this year, trying to kind of put the league on notice. What changed? Is it just kind of looking back and realizing his career isn't what he wanted? Is it that he was healthy this past year and he wants to play more? Was it that just truly that defeat to the Lakers in the in-season tournament where we did an angry cast after that just woke him up? Maybe that's the case. That's kind of what I want to hear from Zion Williamson. I don't think he has a lot of pressure on him this season, but we're expecting big things from him. What's gotten him to this point? How has that journey been? And I'd like to hear him speak more to that. For Brandon Ingram, the big question is going to be, why did you decide to skip the offseason team workouts. How do you balance your stats, helping the team win and negotiating a new deal? What makes you the player that you are, and how do you see yourself fitting in with this roster? I think you would ask him those questions and he might dance around some of those, but I think with him, you do get some truthful, honest answers. And I was not previously worried about Brandon Ingram until that social media post. Like, to me, that kind of screams a little bit like lacking that self-awareness that we were really hoping for with him. So I kind of want to know just where his mind seems to be at. Does he come in looking engaged, being the Brandon Ingram that we normally see, or is there something kind of different to him? A year ago, we saw Zion Williamson, and he was just businesslike, like very businesslike in a way that he hadn't been before. And you could see things kind of changed with him. And maybe that was a good thing because it led him to being healthy this season, even if it took kind of until December, January for all of that. But now it seems like he's ready to go. What about Brandon Ingram's mentality, his mindset with all of that? For new addition DeJounte Murray, the big question is, how do you see yourself fitting in? What does he view his role as? Is it being a point guard and setting up others? Is it being a court spacer? Is it being a menace defensively? All of the above. Does he see himself as the guy to go and get buckets in clutch games, close games, late in the fourth quarter? Have they talked to him about that? Is there kind of an established hierarchy there of what are you going to do when the game gets tough? And how do you respond to opponents? And what is going to be kind of the game plan for that? I want to know that from DeJounte Murray, who's been really engaged with this team, seems really excited to be here. And what makes him excited? Is it Zion Williamson? Zion was at Murray's, introductory press conference. Is it just working with this team? Is it the fact that he's friends with Brandon Ingram? Is it that he is coming to a winning situation or a team that just values defense in the first place? For CJ McCollum, is there any talk of him coming off the bench? If he's asked to come off the bench, what is his reaction going to be to that situation? He's also, very involved with the Players Association. How are they feeling about the second apron and the new collective bargaining agreement that we're all kind of navigating, all the teams are kind of navigating for the first time when it comes to this? Are they happy about that? Do they feel that's something that they're going to want to push back on in the next CBA negotiations? As someone who likes kind of the big business side of it, the salary cap, the dollars and cents, all of that, I'm very fascinated by what he might say to how things have gone. It's preventing a guy like Brandon Ingram from getting paid, frankly. For Herb Jones, what's the next progression? The defense is elite. The defense is elite. I have a show out there saying he could easily win Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion. I stand by that. The three-point shooting came around for him. One of the better corner three-point shooters in the league. Is the next step just more volume from three? Is it just being Herb Jones? Just him being him and not changing anything? Because that player is real good. How easy was it for him to just switch his number? Was he just happy to do it? Does that matter to him? Or was he just like, no, take number 5, no big deal to me? I'm kind of curious. For Trey Murphy, one of the questions that I'm genuinely curious about, and I don't know if he'll actually answer something like this, is, he's in line to get an extension, and we feel he will. He has until October 21st. That's the final day before the regular season starts, to sign that rookie extension. Otherwise, he'll just go and become a restricted free agent in the future, and that's not a big deal. If he gets that extension, he and Brandon Ingram are close. Like, how does that kind of impact being there with his teammates? Do they all just get that it's a business and they understand? But if he gets this big extension and Ingram is there without his, like, how does that dynamic impact the locker room, if it does at all? And is Trey confident of that extension? He'd obviously like to start. I think every player would like to start. Is he okay coming off of the bench? Those are the type of things we really want to hear from him, I think. For Karl Makovich, a guy that I think is going to be pretty interesting this year, I also wonder if, have they talked to him about what his role is going to be with this team? Where does he see himself fitting in as well? Those are all pretty important things because they really need him to develop. So that's what I'm kind of looking at for Media Day with some of the big questions that I want to hear from these players. And I'm going to be really curious their answers. And we'll talk about their answers to all of this and every other thing that they say in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans and the rest of the week here on Locked On Pelicans. It's going to be a lot about media day and training camp and starting to kind of get a sense of what this team will look like this season. Going back to the center spot really quickly right here, though, is what if Daniel Theis is a low-end starter? What if Makovich doesn't develop? The New York Knicks just traded for Karl-Anthony Towns to be their starting center. Does that mean Mitchell Robinson, who's in some trade rumors now, could be an option for the Pelicans? The answer is probably not what you think. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. This is my go-to ticketing app for everything now because they just make it easy to buy tickets. You can use some other apps. You can try other places. Sometimes it is just a pain. Not with Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks, which makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They're just going to show you on the map of the arena or wherever you're going that here's some really good deals, and it probably is good for you to jump on those tickets right there. I've used this for game at SoFi. I've used them for Pelicans games. I used them for Saints games. I use Gametime for everything this year. So I love all of the features that just make it really easy. I love the all-in pricing. When you toggle this, it shows you the total price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. If you're going to a venue you've never been to before, the view from your seat is key, so you're getting the exact experience that you want. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. I will be at Media Day today. We got the mics and everything ready to go. So I hope you subscribe to Locked On Pelicans, become an everydayer, listen Monday through Friday. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 Pelicans podcast. For your second listen today, go listen to Locked On Saints with host Ross Jackson. Saints gave that game away against the Falcons. 2-2 now. Is this, the same team we saw at the start of the year? Somewhere in between? Are they just bad? Is it going to be a long year? What is also going on with some of Clint Kubiak's play calling? Not loving it. Ross Jackson's going to make sense of everything black and gold over the Locked On Saints podcast. Make them your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the New York Knicks really kind of shook up the NBA landscape by trading for Karl-Anthony Towns on Friday night, I think. Look, I love those moments. We talked about this when we talked about Woj retiring, where just a big piece of news happens and then collectively everyone freaks out and it's all really exciting. It's like the secret word on Pee-wee's Playhouse where everyone just kind of goes nuts when it says, and it's just kind of fun to have this collective freak out with thousands of other people, friends, people you don't know, whatever it might be. It's really great. I love those moments. Karl-Anthony Towns traded to the New York Knicks is one of them. That immediately creates an interesting situation. He's going to be their starting center. And I'm not going to get into this trade, right? It makes the Wolves worse, I think. I agree with that. Even if they might be fine long-term, it makes them worse. That's the biggest thing here because they were good last year. They're going to be less good this year. And that's a great situation because they're in the Pels conference. Trade away good players out of the West to the East. Please, more of that. So now the New York Knicks are in some rough situation when it comes to their salary cap. They're a little bit tapped out there. They have a player that could make sense for New Orleans, who has a glaring hole at the center position. We just talked about it in the last segment with those guys maybe not being great. What can they do here to try and upgrade that? And a name that comes up is Mitchell Robinson, New Orleans native from Chalmette. This is a guy that, when you look at him, is a very good rebounder, can score close to the basket, hyper efficient player. Young's not even going to be 20. We won't even be 27 when the season starts. This is someone who makes sense should the Pelicans try and trade for him. Now, there's two issues with this. I don't think they're going to make a move for him. The first one is this, is he's out injured. He's out injured with an ankle injury, and he's not going to return till December at the earliest, likely January. And at that point, how much ramp-up time does he need? What is his impact going to be if he's just kind of like getting his feet literally back under him? He's also been, for the most part, pretty injured throughout his whole career. There's only one season where he has played more than 70 games. He played 31 games last year, 59 the year before that. Those aren't particularly great situations, to bring a player in that just hasn't played a ton. You can't bring in someone that's not going to really help you when we've done that too often here in New Orleans, it feels like. So Mitchell Robinson, I think on the surface, you're like, yeah, go and trade for him, local guy, bring him back. I just don't see where it works because of the injuries. And the other situation is this, one, would he play under head coach Willie Green? So a similar player to Jonas Valanciunas. He's not like an elite guy out there on the perimeter. And if they want to still run that kind of switching scheme, which, they do, I wonder if that's going to really work, or would he just get benched for a smaller guy or a small ball lineup as the game goes on? The other thing to note is that his block rate has gone down pretty significantly from his rookie year. Now, maybe that's injuries. Maybe that's just him being less impactful, but he's kind of a plotting center. And I don't think that works for New Orleans either. And then the final situation that just basically means like no is his salary. It's going to be making $14.318 million this year. The Pelicans don't have a situation where they can find a trade that makes sense. They're missing that mid-tier salary. They have three guys essentially making like 30 or more million, or sorry, four guys making 30 or more $million. Then you have Herb Jones. You'll have Trey Murphy once he signs that extension, but once he signs that, you're not going to trade him. And then guys making like $5 million. So getting the salaries to match just doesn't work for the Knicks. And it feels like giving up a combination of Yves Missi, Jordan Hawkins, and one other player to equal Mitchell Robinson's salary is just not the right use of that kind of depth for New Orleans, even if the Knicks maybe would do that because they need some depth. But to trade for a guy that won't play till December at the earliest, more likely January, February, that's not a situation that makes me particularly excited, and that's not really a trade that I think the Pelicans will do or even should do. The homecoming sounds nice, but I just don't see a world where that really ends up working out. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So Media Day is here. Pelicans play a game a week from today. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. Subscribe to the Locked On Pelicans podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I am your host, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. We're 5 days a week, the #1 Pelicans podcast. Looking forward to breaking down Media Day and training camp with y'all throughout the week. And next week, we're going to get some real basketball recaps. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll see y'all tomorrow.